have something to say.
Okay, I think we can get started again. So, yeah. So we want to design a system like Dropbox or Google Drive.
Correct. So yeah, I was thinking, like usually we tend to think about what a system entails, what the system is built for, but based on personal experience, I guess it's more as a utility service for the user to, upload their data on cloud and download.
Mhm.
Is that right? Like, can I make that assumption that this is the core reason we are building this system?
Yeah, but I can even store on my file system. Why should I build this?
No,
Do
I
you,
mean, it's a cloud service, right? If you're posting it on some like Amazon, network
Mhm.
cloud service, you are
Mhm.
not like it can handle failures and it can take care of scalability depending on, what kind of accounts you have and how much data you can store. If there is a failure on a server, it can automatically, take care of all those things.
But why suddenly, like initially, if you see few years ago, nobody was talking about this, but suddenly it became like, why you think like it got evolved? Like why I need to build a cloud-based storage thing?
I mean, isn't it more for the features that cloud provides, right? It provides it can store all this data along with the scalability and reliability aspects without you worrying about it as a user. You don't have to take care of the servers and all that.
But as soon as I put on cloud, my data could be stolen also.
Yeah, I mean, privacy is one concern. In general, you're putting on someone else's server, but uh, or maybe if you want to this is what I think. In general, cloud has this trade-off, right? You're definitely exposing your data, but at the same time, these cloud providers do provide certain level of, you know uh, services which ensure that your data won't be, stolen.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, go ahead. I think yes.
Yeah, so in terms of features, right, let's maybe if we can nail down some features that we want to deep dive
Mm-hmm.
from this Dropbox. From this Dropbox or Google Drive, some of the things I can think of is like upload or download a file,
Okay.
right? Now, what kind of files do we want to? I mean, files can be any type, right? It can be text, it can be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can. It should support any kind of file type.
Okay, so any type. Um, the other thing, I'm just thinking of the features I tend to use. So things
Mm-hmm.
sharing, share file, is that
Mm-hmm.
something we are considering? Um, then, like, what about the sync feature, right? If I have mapped my Google Drive to a folder on my system, then usually I can also automatically sync it, right? Anytime I come online, it will automatically sync it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we want to like in terms of priority, how should
So
I?
that means like this feature will also offer me kind of clients. Like that's what
Right.
you.
Yeah, yeah, like
So
multiple
what kind of clients
platforms.
you will offer me? So
Right.
so before coming to sync, I just want to see what kind of clients you want to support.
Yeah, so I was thinking of more like from client platforms, there can be web clients, they can be mobile or even desktop based utilities I can download. So
So when you say web, it means like using a
web
browser.
application, browser, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Web mobile or like desktop based
Okay.
clients.
Sounds good. So
So
this. Okay. So your sync functionality will be for all of them.
well, so this is like I'm thinking from two perspectives. One can be, it can be for all of them, right? If I
Mhm.
upload a file through my web browser and then
Mhm.
I connect to Dropbox using my cell phone, then I should see the changes I made, right?
Mhm.
Kind of pull even on that platform. Uh,
Mhm.
or it can be also like the other case I was talking about. If I have a folder on my local system, then, how to automatically kind of identify changes I made to my local folder or on my Google Drive, and how to kind of make them in sync.
Okay.
So these are like two parts to it. One is sync in terms of this, and I'm thinking sync in terms of uh, uh, like local folder versus cloud drive, and just keeping them aligned. So yeah, so I mean, in terms of these are some of the features. Then other than that, of course, thinking about an application like Dropbox or Google Drive, there would be things around we want to make our system reliable, and all those distributed systems concepts, right? Um, so scalable and stuff. But I don't know how. Do you have a preference for what I should focus on in the first shot or in some order?
So basically, what do you think? What things should matter first, like availability? I think you're asking more about availability, consistency, reliability.
Yeah, like all those typical principles that are basis of distributed systems.
What do you think reliability should be here or not?
So reliability should be here for, I guess that is one of the fundamental things. Like if some failure happens, then it should automatically have an architecture that can handle that. Um, so in terms of, if I think
So
of,
failure like you uploading a file.
like if there is a fault tolerance, basically, right? That's how I look at reliability. So if I'm trying to upload a certain file as a basic example, and if at the back end there is some server failure or some service failure, right? Then my system architecture should be robust enough to kind of handle and adapt to it, or
No,
give gracefully a message that something happened, right?
okay.
Yeah. Um, the other thing I can think of is like you were talking about availability consistency. Um, uh, in general, with this cap theorem idea that we can have 2 out of 3. So in a utility like this cloud storage, consistency can have different flavors, right? Consistency can be if I upload a file and if it says that it has been uploaded, that means it's on cloud storage, then it should be on cloud storage. There shouldn't be any, it shouldn't be that it said something and it didn't do it. So from that perspective, it should be consistent. But
So
at the
that's
same time,
reliability.
yeah, I mean, depends how we want to see it. But the other aspect is if I upload a file and I look at my homepage of Dropbox and it shows that file is uploaded, I can see that file. Now I log into my cell phone, like a Dropbox via cell phone. And maybe because of this, a little bit of time lag, that file doesn't show in my homepage there, but within next second it shows up.
Okay.
So it's like eventual consistency. So
So basically, your system would be always available, but consistency can take a hit.
okay, so is that what you are suggesting we should go for?
I think so, yes, that should
Okay.
be reasonable in this case.
Okay.
This is not a mission critical application that I should always see up to date data. A few seconds or millisecond lags is
Yeah.
reasonable.
Okay. So always those. So does this seem reasonable, like in terms of requirements
So
or?
I would say like I would only right now I would not focus too much on the share file,
Okay.
and that could be done later. So, but I would like to see other things which are like you mentioned: upload, download, sync, how you
Okay.
manage reliability, availability. So these things I would
Okay.
be focused right now, given
Right.
that we have.
Right. So Aseem, one question on that. If I start this basic feature of upload, download, right, or in general high level design, one question that comes to mind is there a limit on like file size or something? Like in terms of the user base, how many users are we supporting, or should I first design for, or maybe I can design for the fundamental case and then evolve my design?
But we should have something like a back envelope estimation, something which you can come up with on
Yeah,
that.
I mean, in terms of like, if we look at these utilities, right, I believe they support like millions of users, but
Yes, you can start with like so for my applications which I want to build. So basically, first thing is I'm not building Dropbox or Google Drive. I'm building something similar like that.
yeah,
So to get started, I think I'm estimating I would have 1 million users at some point of time.
yeah, 1 million users. And is there a limit on like when we talk about file sizes? Uh, then,
File size, which whatever they want, they can upload. I will support that.
okay. And
Aseem,
how about the, I mean, as I'm saying this, I'm also thinking if I should kind of push these questions a little later because these would impact the scalability. So the question I was coming to was how many requests, like how many concurrent upload requests can happen. But that also depends on if I have 1 million users, then I mean,
Yeah, you can come up with some numbers and then we can move ahead.
yeah, yeah.
Aseem, one quick question. I mean, like, are we? I joined a bit late, so I'm wondering, like, are we expecting like everybody to contribute anything to it, or it's more of like
No,
this?
could you please post your questions?
Okay, post
On
questions
the
on the chat.
chat
Okay,
Yeah,
and
post your question
then,
and we will answer. Please.
okay,
yeah, in the chat, yeah. Yeah, but thanks, Sangha, for asking. Yeah.
yep, cool. Thanks. Yep.
I mean, in terms of number of requests, I'm just putting approximate number. Should I put like if it's 1 million users, like 100K requests per minute or something?
Yes, for now, I think let's take 100K requests.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
to
So
get
yeah,
started, yeah. And that will include both your read and writes.
I believe so. We can, oh, yeah, sure. Like if I'm talking about request, I guess I can do that, but unless you think that's not a realistic number, but
Okay,
in my mind, I'm thinking of both read plus writes.
okay. Okay, I think we're good enough to get started.
Okay. So so the first thing the way I would approach this is as a very high level design, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting very deep into any feature. So
Mm-hmm.
if I were to think of, like we talked about number 1, 3, 4, all of these. So if I have, let's say, client 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clients, right? Simplicity. And then I have I believe I can assume something like a storage, like Azure storage or Amazon S3, whatever. Would that be okay?
Okay, so you have something storage, okay.
Yeah. And now if I look at the functionality here, I have a couple of features, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like file upload thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a little. uh, so I have file upload. Is there a better way to write this? But okay. And then I have this sync feature,
Okay.
right? So if I can kind of break down my functionalities in terms of these modules. The
So,
other,
so when you say client one, client two, what that means?
yeah, so I'm thinking at this point, like multiple users.
Multiple users. Okay, So I thought what you mean like client one and
Yeah, I mean,
same
I'm
user.
thinking, I'm going back to my point. I think it's a little overloaded term. So my
Mm-hmm.
clients, one way would be, we can think both ways, right? I can take it as a client, like I said on number 3, it can be a web-based, and this is cell phone,
Or
right?
okay.
Or I can take it user-based, whatever.
Okay.
Like, is there a preference? Like, would
No,
you,
I don't have. Well, I just want to understand when you say client, is it for
okay.
talking about one user or multiple users?
Okay, so maybe let me, if it's okay, I can just go with one user and like the same.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, So I'll go with these clients, and I have this storage. At a high level, I would break down my design in terms of these modules. And also one question is that when we log into Dropbox or Google Drive, right, the first thing we see is the files we have or folders we have. So we don't directly start uploading or downloading, right?
Yeah.
We have a list. So from that perspective, I'm thinking, should I also have some sort of a very high level metadata type of thing that only gives me that? I don't need to worry about like storage. So I'm thinking if I have something like metadata.
Okay, so your metadata is basically giving you the structure.
Yeah, that's just the structure. Like these are 10 files in your.
Okay, okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, because, and the reason I'm thinking about this as a separate service is that
Mhm.
the amount of work that this will do will be different from others. Like it's a relatively lighter weight.
Yeah, because it is only carrying the
Yeah,
metadata. Okay,
yeah.
sounds reasonable. And then your sync is doing basically sync of your files. Is it something like that?
Yeah, it can do, I think I can further break it down into file sync, like number 3 and 4, like sync between clients or sync within a folder.
Okay, I think for now we'll stick to this sync
Okay.
only,
Okay.
and we'll break it once that we'll
Yeah.
revisit it. And file upload is
So it can be file upload or download. I can
okay, got it.
download. Yeah. So this will be more like, let's say I am using a web client. So at a high level, a client pushes a file to this service and it gets stored here. And then there should be some sort of acknowledgement that comes back to the client. It's stored, right? Similarly, at the beginning, when the client logs in, it should actually access metadata.
Got it. Okay.
Then metadata, maybe it can go to some database. It doesn't need to go to storage full-fledged because it's lighter weight.
Mm-hmm.
I can store the structure here, and in a similar fashion, it will just report me the structure. And then I can further query file upload here.
And when your sync service will come into picture?
Yeah, sync will be more like, so anytime, okay, this is a good point. So sync should also come into picture right away, right? Like at the point of like 1A or 1B type of thing, because the moment I log in, it should, oh, okay. So let me take a step back. So sync is more like, it can be, if I think of a sync folder functionality, right? Then I make sure that I capture the changes either on my local drive or cloud storage. Then this should also get triggered in the beginning itself,
Okay.
upload, when I log in, like, but yeah, so this should also like sort of, I mean, depends on the order how I want to do it. Maybe I can do the sync first and then metadata, but yeah.
Okay. So I would like to see how your metadata and storage will look like. I'm just a bit interested in that. If you can spend few minutes and explaining how your metadata will look like.
Yeah, so can I just move to another screen, or is there a way to keep this and move to another one?
I think we know the functionality. If you want, you can remove the top part.
Okay.
If you remove the features, I think that's fine for now for me. You can take a
Yeah,
screen.
but all right, so talking about the metadata part, so I'm thinking in, so metadata, what kind of information do I want to store here, right? This would be more like, um, let's say I log in, so I should have, I can use this.
So basically, I want to see the data model. What kind
Yeah,
of data?
yeah, yeah, right. So in terms of data model, there are a couple of options, right? It back to how flexible I want the model to be. If I go with relational model, then my schema evolution is a little tricky part, right? Like the
What
data
kind of
model
relationship?
evolution.
What kind of relation? Let's go with the relational model and
Okay,
let's see what
okay.
kind of entities you have.
Yeah. So let's say I have, I can have a file entity like, I can have a file entity with columns like file name, size,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And last modified, all of that.
Got it.
And then within now each file, as you mentioned, that there can be files of different types, right? So for metadata, I don't think I need to worry too much about keeping them in separate tables because
Mm-hmm.
it's metadata, right? If it was
Mm-hmm.
data, then I would have maintained different structures for images and text files because the
Mm-hmm.
nature of data is different.
Mm-hmm.
But for this one, actually, I also need to maintain like a user or user data stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
have my user ID,
Mm-hmm.
the files that belongs to that user should have file ID. So like when I log in, right, it's like based on the user ID, it should fetch all the data.
Okay.
And also, what else can I have? Let's see.
So how how this will basically how this will know like where is the actual file live? Are you
Oh,
capturing?
yeah. Okay. Location of the file. Right. So I should keep track of. Well, so okay, so that's also a good point. I'm thinking that since we are, as the system evolves, right, if it's a distributed system, and when the file upload service will try to figure out, or download service will try to figure out where the file is, can I use some type of hashing? Because my servers, if I have n servers, because of the reliability concerns and all that scalability, my number of servers can increase and my file location can move. So if I'm using some hashing, then I don't need to store.
I would say it's too early. First, I want to see a initial thing how you will see, and then probably when this.
No, that's true. But I think I
Mhm.
was okay that we can postpone. But I was just trying to think around your point about location. Like,
Mhm.
really need to store
So I thought you
location.
would be putting somewhere in the storage, and it will generate some kind of link, and you can put that in your file entity that where actually the file resides on your storage, something like a file link.
Okay.
So that's what I assumed that actual file is in the storage, and then you will link between your metadata. That's it. Just correct me if I made a wrong assumption.
No, I mean, it really depends on the design, I guess. So if we want to go that route, that's totally fine.
So what was your thought process? Because you're,
Um,
I want to see like how your storage and metadata would get linked together. How I'll know like
oh,
my file is
I
living in the
see.
storage.
Yeah, okay. So I was actually looking at them as a little decoupled system. So
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that they are, independent entities of their own. So,
Mm-hmm.
but coming back to your point that when I upload a file, that
Mm-hmm.
I can't just totally decouple them because when I upload a file, that information has to go to my metadata as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you are right that initially my thought process was around having them as decoupled, that
Mm-hmm.
I can have them independent, but I agree with your thought point there that I need some sort of connection to say that, how do I push information to my metadata server or pull information from there. So I think ideally I should have something like some connection here.
Okay, and
That might be filing. Yeah.
okay, coming back to do you think like these two entities would be sufficient? So this will represent my metadata for users and files, everything. How user and the file are user and okay. So you mentioned user ID and file ID. Okay, so there would be another entity about user then.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, like the user details, correct. So this is more like foreign key stuff, but yeah, I can have like,
So
uh,
basically, what kind of relationships you are like one to one, many to many?
yeah, yeah. So I can have something like user ID, or I should have drawn it diagrammatically, but
No, that's fine. User ID and name should be fine for now.
yeah, yeah. and some other details we can add.
Yeah.
But my idea is that this is a user profile and user data connected,
Mm-hmm.
like foreign key relationships between user ID, and then one user can have multiple files in his account, his or her account, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this would be more like foreign key relationship on file ID between user data and file, and
Mm-hmm.
it would be more like a one-to-end relationship.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I think this should be sufficient for to define our metadata and other things. So let's see, like I'm a user, I'm on client one,
Yeah.
and now I'm trying to upload a file. What will happen?
Right. So, in terms of uploading, right, there are a few things to my mind. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
One is that, like I defined different services, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when the user makes any kind of request, whether it's fetching metadata or file upload or download, there has to be some interface which is not directly exposed to the user, but it's just a web interface, right? It should actually, let me draw it here. So I'm thinking of there has to be, I should have done a better job here, but let me, there should be some interface like I can say, um, sort of an inbound filter, right? That will take care of few things like be it authentication, or if I'm requesting a file upload, then this thing should take care of my routing to which service this request should go.
Okay, but that could come a little later also. But right now, I just want to like say like
Oh,
I
okay, okay,
about authentication, mapping, uh,
okay.
how the
You want to
process.
focus on file.
So it's like how the upload. So here I am a user. I'm uploading 1 TB file or let's say 500 GB file. How it will,
Yeah,
and if something
okay.
goes wrong, how you will react to that?
Right, right. Okay, so let's step back. So in terms of file upload, if I'm
Huh.
uploading a certain like 20 gig or whatever size of file,
Hmm.
um, there are a couple of things. So I'm using, that means I'm using that much of bandwidth, right? And if
Hmm.
there is some, there has to be some sense of acknowledgement, right? That the file got uploaded and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. So your module should be doing that. So that's what I
Yeah,
want to understand.
yeah. So this, like I have here, so if it uploads this way, then at a high level, when it gets stored in the database, right, in my storage, that should send some sort of acknowledgement and that should get
Hmm.
to the client. But also thinking of how things, if I were to upload a file or a folder on Dropbox, right, it's not like I'm thinking of a queue like structure here, because if I submit a request to upload a folder which includes
Hmm.
files, right, then I get sort of progress status going on, like upload
Hmm.
stuff. So I'm thinking if I can have some sort of a queue interface here.
No, let's say only right now I support only one file upload.
Okay, okay.
So what you will do? I'm uploading a 20 GB file. What will happen? I just want to understand how things will work.
Right. So if it's a 20 GB file, there can be, and if it's going in like one like big kind of chunk, right? If
Hmm.
it's in one big chunk, then there can be a lot of network related failures that can happen, and then the whole thing will be lost,
Hmm. So
right?
basically, so in your design right now, I would start uploading entire 20 GB together. So
Correct.
happy cases, everything is ranked properly, no network failure, and everything is uploaded. But what other things can go wrong here?
Oh, okay, okay. So
Let's say I was having an intermittent network failure, but it will come back. What will happen? Would your application able to
oh,
handle that?
I see, I see. Okay, so one thing that comes to mind is if there is an intermediate, any kind of failure, then
Hmm.
according to my design right now, it should
Hmm.
submit that 20 gig file and it should retry that whole file again.
Okay, yeah. So in your design,
That,
you will
yeah,
retry.
that, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was asking in your design, you will retry the entire 20 gig.
Yeah, correct. But that also gives me the hint if there is, I can do it in that packet-based format like we have in networks. So if I break down my file in chunks, right? Having said that, if I break down my 20 gig file into, let's say, 20 chunks, then I would also need some sort of module to keep track of the ordering, right? Because the file needs to be consolidated and organized in a proper way. But if I have 20 chunks, then if something gets lost, right? Now there are a couple of scenarios. One is it depends on the kind of failure. Sometimes I might need to resubmit, but there is a possibility that I can only resend, you know, I mean, I don't, is there a possibility that I can just kind of retransmit only a fewer chunks that will save the bandwidth?
Okay. Yes, I think there could be different things can be done at design level also or at network level. So like one thing you mentioned, like breaking to chunks. So yeah, could be done here, but okay. Uh,
Yeah. So, and actually that can also help as I'm thinking about it. I mean, we may not want to address this right away since you're focusing on this, but your idea about breaking it into chunks, if I have also multiple users, like we talked about 1 million users, all trying, let's say a bunch of them are trying to upload a file, each of in the range 20 to, let's say, 50 gig, then trying to hit the whole file and trying to upload that can be tricky. It might be better to break it into chunks even from that perspective to kind of,
So that is interesting now. When you say dividing into chunks, you mean like while uploading, downloading, or you mean like physically dividing the file into chunks?
no, so for the client, it shouldn't be transparent. As a client, I'm just uploading one file. So it's my service, which should be breaking it down into chunks at behind the scenes, right?
Okay. So to divide into chunks, the service itself has the entire file. How it will break down into chunks?
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe this service further can be broken down or it can interact. Okay, let me think about this.
What if you itself split your file into chunks?
Yeah, actually, that might be a better idea. Like if as a client, I upload a file, but just on the client side itself, I can have a chunk module
Mm-hmm.
sort of. And the reason I'm thinking is that if I do that, then it also help with the network bandwidth between client and my service itself. Because if I try to upload the whole file here, like in number two, then that is the hit, right? That my network is taking. And I'm taking here. So that might not be a good idea. So yeah, if I have something like a chunk service.
Chunk service on your client, or it's like a full-fledged
Yeah.
service?
No, I'm thinking of on the client now. Like,
Like it's a process on the client then.
yeah, it's a process on the client level.
Okay.
Think of that.
So
Um, sorry, it's
basically now you're splitting your client into different processes or modules.
yeah, right. That
Okay,
makes
sounds
sense.
good.
Yeah, so I'm thinking when I submit a file, it first gets broken down into chunks.
Mm-hmm.
And those chunks are submitted. This is getting a little cluttered. I'm trying to
Oh,
see.
that's fine. I can understand. Don't bother
Okay.
about that.
So these chunks then actually lead to, like, I have multiple chunks here, right?
Okay.
So they get passed down to this service.
Uh-huh.
Um, and yeah, so they get passed down to the service, and like on if I go back to that queue idea, then I have some sort of queue where they are getting lined up.
Uh-huh.
And when I talk about my storage, given that we want to also account for a distributed system,
Uh-huh.
have, like, multiple instances.
Uh-huh.
And if I have this queue structure,
Uh-huh.
Then like in terms of queue, we have these algorithms, right? One of these surveys, like it can be a round robin fashion that each of them can pick up like one, sort of piece of data and start processing. And there will be a little more, I don't know if you want to go into detail on that, but there are a lot of algorithms here which we need to account for between this queue and the storage, right? Because like where does the queue item goes, who picks it up, what if it fails, then how does it come back to the queue, that kind of stuff.
Okay, I will say like that is abstraction for me. For now I will say like that is 100%
Okay.
visible. So
Okay.
so now your chunks reached your queue. What will happen next?
Yeah, so my chunks reach the queue
Mhm.
and they need to be uploaded to the storage.
So are you going to aggregate them and store it into storage? Is it something?
Yeah, yeah. So it depends. It depends how I'm thinking about my storage, right? For example, if we go to the general storage functionality about RAIDs, right? There are different RAID models. I can
Mhm.
store my chunk. Let's say my one file has 20 chunks, right? I can either store it, I can have a storage format where chunks 1 to 5 go here,
Mhm.
next 5 go here, and so on, right? That is more like a striping model that I have my data distributed. Of course,
Mhm.
I also have replication, that's a different story. So that's one model. The other model is I can have that, and in that case, if I do that, then I also need, like you said, when the client requests a file, right?
Mhm.
I need some sort of feature which will kind of order them so that the file is given to the client in a correct format, right? But in terms
So,
of storage,
okay, I just want to interrupt you. So, I just want to understand. So, you are now saving your file into chunks. That's what.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that
That's,
means your metadata and other things will also change a bit.
um, yeah, that's correct.
But
Like,
we'll come back. We'll come back to that later. But okay, I got your idea that you will have a chunk process which will split into chunks.
yeah, yeah.
Then.
So the other reason I'm thinking about chunks is that there are two things that are coming to my mind. One is I'm trying to defer this file, like ordering of chunks and combining chunks at the download time, right? So at the upload time, I'm just kind of dumping them and distributed them across the nodes I have, storage nodes. And the second thing that is coming to my mind is that if I try to make a change to the file, right,
Mm-hmm.
and I just make one change somewhere, then,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to submit that file, if I maintain chunks, then I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to upload the whole 20 chunks. I can just upload maybe one, like
But
wherever.
how you will know which thing is updated and which thing is not?
Is there some sort of feature, like just like the chunk service I have?
Okay.
So since this chunk service is at the client side, so I will also have some detection. I don't know if it's possible, but some sort of identification mechanism, which it can be a checksum based thing, right?
Okay.
Will identify which chunk has been modified. And then if each chunk is only, let's say, like 1 gig, right? Then whichever chunk got modified, then
Mm-hmm.
only that gets passed to the upload thing.
So
That
basically, you will have a process to find some kind of checksum.
difference. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Or some kind of hashing.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay, I think I got the idea. And I also want to do a time check. I think we have only few minutes left. I also want to understand about your synchronization service.
Okay. Yeah. So synchronization is
So now the file got uploaded. Now
right.
I'm at client two. What will happen?
Okay, so now I come to client 2. At that time, it needs to connect to sync service, and sync service needs to detect changes. So there are two things, right? When client 2 connects, one is
Mm-hmm.
changes to my local storage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything on my, you know, client
Mm-hmm.
client that got changed. And the other thing is changes to the cloud storage.
No, let's say like that file which you just uploaded.
Okay.
Talk about that only.
Yeah, so in that case, we are trying to monitor. So there should be some monitoring service, right,
Mm-hmm.
which should capture the changes between my local and cloud. In this case, it will be the file that I uploaded.
Hmm.
This should actually, so now this is interesting. This is coming to the download feature, I think. So because I need to bring that file, right, and map it to my cell phone. As I'm saying this, I'm getting one other thing. I think it all
Mm-hmm.
goes back to the metadata service, right? Because when I connect via client 2, it should
Hmm.
to see essentially first the list of files,
No,
right?
your client 2 is connected. It is already connected. So client 2 is online. So it already called metadata and
Okay,
had.
okay.
So
So
now client 1 was also online. The client 2 was also. So I understood your point. As soon as new client will get online, it will call metadata and it will get the latest structure. That's
yeah,
fair enough. But now both client 1 and client 2 both are active.
okay. So now if we go back to the sync service, now essentially it comes to the point of pulling this different chunks that are belonging to a file and putting them in order and delivering them to the client 2. And that is also, actually that will only happen when the client requests a download of the file. It won't just directly happen at the sync level. In other words, what I'm trying to say is if I log in, if I now connect, if I now look at my cell interface, I don't need to directly pull the file right away. Only when the client clicks the file name or says
No,
down.
right now a client does not even know about the file. So basically, you were having, so basically, initially client 1 and client 2 are empty. You uploaded one file abc.txt from client
Right.
1. It will go. Now client 2 will open and how it will know like something is there. So
So
I
there should be some sort of notification, I guess.
no what okay let's talk. That is interesting now. So what kind of notification or if you want to, I thought you have something to do with the synchronization service.
Yeah. Like in terms of, I think I was thinking of multiple things in that sync service, but
Okay.
breaking it down the way you're suggesting, it makes sense for the client first to have some sort of notification, right?
I would say no, we'll come back to notification a bit
Okay.
late. But what your sync service is doing, I just interested in seeing that. How client to is it something? So basically, without notification service, is there any other way client to will know?
Um, Other than notification, it can be,
Like client to is doing some kind of polling.
oh, I see. Um, I mean, there can be different strategies. There can be push versus pull model, right? Like the polling thing you're suggesting. So one is client to actively, when it comes, when I like access it, then it can actively request for any changes that happen on the server. That will be more like a polling thing. Like I'm asking for changes. Did anything change? But push model will be more like if when I access this client and the server automatically pushes all the changes.
Okay, so whom should client to? So let's say we are only right now. Let's have our system right now only supports the pull model. So
Yeah,
what? Whom should I ask? What client two would be doing? Whom client two would be asking like what I need? So it
right.
goes through that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it will go back to the inbound filter module here because the client to as such to client to it's transparent, right? I am not as a user, I'm not distinguishing between I'm connecting to file upload or sync. So I connect to inbound service.
No, your client two is knowing what it is doing. Client two is full fledged application running on the client system. It has chunk service. It has this dupe check. So it can know what it is trying to do. So how inbound filter would also know what.
So can it be like something like a, like a watcher functionality, right? So if it is watching for changes,
Yes, so that would be, yes, so that is abstraction. That would be pull, push, notice.
Right.
But again, whom should it ask for? Like, would it go to file upload or would it ask to sync service? Would
No,
it?
it would be to the sync service. It would be sync service because it's not like it's just trying to pull the changes, right? It's trying to sync with the cloud storage. So I'm thinking that similar to chunk service, if it has some sort of watcher module,
Okay.
and that module interacts with sync service.
And sync service will, how sync service will know something got changed?
Yeah, so sync service there has to be, one way is metadata, right? If I can see a list of, like anytime a file gets uploaded to the storage, that information also gets pushed down to metadata, like there is additional file for this user, right?
Mm-hmm.
Be that sync service can first connect to my metadata store and see if out of initially I was seeing 5 files in my account, now I have 6 files, right? So it knows which file to pull now.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, so metadata store responds with, let's say this file 1 got uploaded. So it responds with file 1 name, and then or the file link where it's stored and all that info. And then sync service will further interact with using that file link. It might, so I'm thinking there might be some sort of, file link might be enough, or if I need to think of hashing because this is distributed system, so my file can be in different servers. So essentially the idea is that it should pull the file from since I'm storing it in chunks, it will pull the chunks, and then there should be some aggregation service that
No,
will.
I think you mentioned this will only let client know something got changed. When client will try to open it, that time only it will try to bring the file in, right?
No, it depends, right? That's where in my mind, I was thinking of it in 2 steps. I wasn't thinking of that when the client 2 connects, it shouldn't directly download the file.
Yes.
All I need to know is, okay, there is an additional file there.
Metadata. Yeah.
Right. And that should be enough for metadata, like base service can provide that. But if I now go to that file and if I say, okay, click on that file, and if
No,
I
no, no, right now we are still on that point only. Now, client one uploaded a file, client two should know like something got.
yeah,
So basically, you are doing some kind of a watcher which will be
yeah,
talking. Can you just draw that for me?
yeah. So if I have some sort of a watcher,
So that whom it will be talking to, sync. That's what I heard.
yes, yes. So this thing is in client, and
And
this thing will be talking to sync.
then you mentioned it will talking to internal components to get
Talk
whatever.
to the metadata store,
Okay.
and then it will metadata will respond with what additional files got uploaded or deleted or whatever.
Okay, so it seems like this watcher is interesting part. So seems it could be either doing you mentioned pull or push, but it would be consistently in touch with sync service.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
now, based on our, let's talk a little bit about now scalability and other things.
okay,
Basically, sync service would be the one which would be hit the most. And every, let's say you're doing a pull model where you're
yeah,
10 seconds. So this guy would be the heavily hit guy. Other services could be still okay when the file upload happen or download or metadata call happen.
yeah.
This guy would be the hit. So what do you think? Like how you scale this component?
Right, right. Um, so this thing, so what I'm thinking of, what are the top hotspots here, right?
Hmm.
In terms of the service. There is the watcher is on the client side, so that's fine. But on the server side, first of all, the sync service itself can be scaled, like in terms of replicated, right? Um, so if I have multiple instances and, in terms of like if I have 100 users and they are trying to sync, at their own level, there will be like 100 requests hitting this one service. So one thing is, at the high level, I can first replicate this one so that maybe I have some sort of load balancer that say, okay, maybe in round robin or fashion, or it can be the number of connections that each sync service is handling. So each of them will get certain load, right, about sync. And similarly, I can also scale I probably would have to scale my metadata store, because it shouldn't be that I have 5 sync services and all of them are hitting the same single.
No. Okay, so I have a question there also. Why you sync service is directly calling metadata? You have already a metadata service. Why it is not talking to your metadata service? You made your metadata.
So yeah, that makes sense.
Of your metadata.
Yeah, that can be true. I was thinking more from the number of hops, right? Right now, my sync service is directly talking to metadata store, but yeah, if in terms of modularity, I can actually break it down and have it like.
So I thought you did a separations of concern.
Yeah, I did. I was thinking along those lines. Yeah, so I can have called this one. This way it's more modular. Yeah.
I think we have almost like 2-3 minutes, and if you just want to wrap it up, I think you can just wrap it up with some closing notes. I think we are almost at the end.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like we were talking about scalability, I think there are a couple of things. They're about scalability of these microservices I have. Then there is also scalability of the database itself, right? The storage utilities. And I would also need to take care of yeah, I mean, is there something, does that make sense, or is there some particular point I should be hitting?
I think Dippy, we're good. I think we're almost at the end of the time. But yeah, thank you so much for your effort. I think we will cover different components in part. So that was good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, I think now we can open for questions.
Should I just clear this up, or should I just?
I think just keep it for now.
Okay.
People have specific questions about something, but yeah, I saw a lot of questions there.
Okay.
But it seems like we have people already answered them, so that was good. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, for some questions, people already answered, and there are some questions which are still open.
So basically, first thing is, I just want to mention in system design, we can't go really in depth of everything. It's up to the interviewer which side he wants to take and see the things. So for me, the things which seems more interesting to me or important, I was going in that direction. So that was my take on that.
Yeah, but it was a really awesome session, both of you.
Thank
Dippy
you.
presented well, as well as
really good.
he moderated very well. Yeah, absolutely, it was good.
Thank you.
So I do have few comments as an observer. So when you ask the question, DP actually directly jumped to the and made that assumption it's a cloud. It will be based on the cloud, though you did not explicitly mention that.
Right, yeah.
And another was that she was not able to handle that question you asked, that why do we need that?
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah, I'm curious to hear like everyone's thoughts, because I was like,
okay, I can give my feedback first.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So okay, so I will first start with the good things. Basically, DP, you were able to come up with the modularized design. You were able to split into microservices. You actually knew like you would have your data storage, metadata, clients. So basically, you were able to split into really good level, high level, and you knew your flow. And and you are at some point you are going into different directions, but that's okay. As an interviewer, I will also always try to steer which direction I want. So if you are going in other direction, that does not make you like you are going on the wrong path. That is something like I right now I don't want to explore that. It's like you are going to give a session tomorrow on backtracking. Like I don't want to go there and backtrack. I don't actually want to go
Yeah.
there. I just want to go on a path which I think, and then probably I'll backtrack that path and then go to another path.
Right. Right.
So that was my thing, and I think you were really, I think, good way of a listener. You're able to understand questions. You're able to respond them, and wherever you need clarification, you asked it. So actually, that was good. Like we had a really good conversation. That was a good part. Now coming to the parts where you can take this to the next level. Always
Yeah.
we have something to improve upon.
Right.
So
Sure.
I think like Praveen mentioned that initially I wanted to hear any company these days are customer obsession. Who is my customer? Why I'm building this thing? So
Yeah.
so first question generally should be who is my customer? I could say like my customer could be a university, like UW is going to use it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because so initially I told I want to build like Dropbox or Google Drive. That does not mean I exactly want to replicate that.
Okay.
Even new features which they don't have, or can just do something similar. So it could be like I'm building this for UW. UW cannot afford Dropbox or Google Drive, so they collaborated with me and told like, okay, for my students, or it could be a library or somewhere, or it could be
Yeah.
like general public. I'm building this. I'm getting into the market where I want to compete with Google or Dropbox.
That totally makes sense. And, because I was very much like sort of into just the core Dropbox or Google Drive. So in my mind, it was just like it's a cloud service. So
Yeah,
anybody.
so it's like if you want to make assumption also, that's not bad, but you can just take that I'm making assumption like this would be exactly like Dropbox.
Okay.
No, don't think. I told you it should be like Dropbox, but don't exactly. We are not replicating Dropbox or Google.
Yeah. Got it.
So, so basically, I have told like I don't want share functionality now. That is not my use case.
Yeah.
And other things, and then I think, like Praveen mentioned, that directly it was a cloud storage. It could be something else also. It could be different thing, but you can clarify. Like I am assuming that this would be I would be storing on some cloud, and the reason why we are doing file sharing these days is because it's super cheap. Earlier it was costly, but right now if you see the network
Yeah.
has improved upon a lot, and storage became super cheap and reliable, and the security concerns also went down. People right now don't worry that their data would be stolen. So
Yeah.
that's why we are going from a local file system to cloud-based system, because other constraints became so better that that is a win situation. If I buy a hard disk also, or it would be like $100, but within cents I can get a cloud storage. Why should I invest on a hard drive? And then I have to also think about consistency,
Failures and all that. Yeah.
reliability, and other things.
Yeah. Okay.
So these
That
things
really
why
helps.
I wanted to go to this. So these are the things, and then you jot down the requirements. So it was good. You could go a little bit more on the requirements, but I think for any interview, it's okay to have a MVP, minimal viable plan, to
Yeah.
get started. We can't build everything in 45 minutes. I just want to see what you can take the high level requirements, and then we can break it down.
Yeah.
Overall, I think you did a good job, but now I think I can ask more people to chime
Yeah.
in. Like,
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Praveen, you want to add more?
No, I'm okay. Yeah. So whatever point I observed that. So initially I shared my point, and yeah, time wise. So observe that we spend more than 12, 13 minutes just to on the requirement side. So my take here is that when we have to actually freeze the requirement, so number one, we have to actually try to scope down instead of scope up. wherever possible. And the second is that, I mean,
Can you
don't
give
try to give the
scope
explanation in
down or
detail.
scope up?
Yeah, don't try to give the explanation in detail, because that's actually eat your time, consume your time. So until unless interviewer actually, it's really required.
Mhm.
So Praveen, can you give an example of scope down or scope up? That is interesting observation.
So
If you have.
yeah, one was that sharing. So she did not confirm that whether you want or not. So
Okay.
directly included that. It was good. I mean, you talked about that, but just confirm before including in your scope.
Yeah, I think sharing was confirmed because Aseem said won't consider it, but you're right in terms of like this time we invested, right? Like in terms of sync feature, we kind of started talking about.
Oh, okay. So then I missed that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, even I felt like you directly came to the clients, but you could have you directly came to Sync, but you could have asked like what kind of clients we support, like web, mobile, or desktop, or I could say like I don't support desktop. It could be. So basically, you made yourself assumption. So basically, if I could have told you I don't support desktop, then you don't even need the sync functionality.
No, I would still need sync functionality because even if I have one, like I would have one client, right? Uh,
So let's say I have only web client.
oh,
I,
I see, I see. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
I so basically when you went to sync, the first thing I came to my mind was you never spoke about clients.
Yeah,
So
correct.
if I say I'm only building like a web client, I don't support desktop or mobile, then the sync functionality component itself does not holds here.
And I don't know, I mean, whether you talked about the file size, maximum limited file size or not. Yeah,
Yeah.
you did? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that file size limitation can change your design. If I just say that, okay, my file, my requirement is just that my file will be few KBs, then there's no need to make this complicated chunker and all these things. I will just upload a single shot.
That is a good point. Yeah, correct.
No, but Dippy asked me, I told like I want infinite size.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the side conversation we were having like on the chat was also like, um, if you want to scope down, maybe we should try to find and see like if there are some other existing services that we can say like, oh, we'll use that service and that will take.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could use that to scope down maybe. I see like we have covered a lot of things here. I mean, like we kind of solved almost the complete solution. We touched upon all the solutions. If you want to scope down, maybe we should try those things like what
Yeah,
third-party
like a
service.
reuse thing.
No, but
Yeah.
if you see
And
Naga
one
here,
interesting thing that Uday mentioned in the chat was like there's something called rsync on Linux, and which has all kinds of controls like if you want to rate limit the this file, right? If somebody is having like low bandwidth and if you want to run like very low rate of file transfer and like the size limit, what is the maximum size you can transfer from,
Yeah.
all those kind of controls are available in that. I don't know if that's available as a library to use, but that was one that I found.
But that's a very good point about also like having this library of things and rate limiting concept.
Yeah. I mean, like we could go very in depth into like all those chunking, right? Like how
Yeah.
to maintain ordering, how to maintain parallel
Yeah.
and all those things. But or we could then say like we could abstract it out saying that okay, there's some service like this which does the file transfer, which takes care of file transfer optimized way. I'll use
Yeah.
that service, and then we can do, yeah, and that
Makes sense.
knew that
Hey
idea.
Naga, one thing just to note there is like I think rsync works like server to server file transfer. But I mean like this is a client to server synchronization, right? So I think whatever Dippy and Simfolk, I think those
I
are
think,
tools which
yeah,
is
the way I'm reading about that feedback about rsync is not particularly, like knowing some feature like that is great, but even if I can abstract it, right? Saying that if there is an existing
yes,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
my
can
point.
use
It's
it.
all
yeah,
rsync alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
So I do have a question here. So was that the pace of the interview was okay or too slow, or we need to, the pace should be a little bit more than that in real interview?
I think it all depends on person to person, because every individual is different. So for me, I think some places I want to do little bit rush, because I want to see Dippy's point of view on other components like sync, metadata, scaling, or it could depend on some interviews only interested in file. Or he or she might go more in depth, like how this hashing will work and other things. So it depends on the interviewer. I thought like I will go through different components and see my level.
But if we go slow and whatever we agree in the requirement and we are not able to cover that, is that a negative or what?
No, I don't think it would be negative. It all depends on the interviewer and the interview. So if let's assume I am going too much into file upload, then DP could have asked me like, hey, are we only going to solve this today, or are we also want to touch other components? So if I say no, I'm not so much interested in other components, let's focus right now only this, and then so even DP could have asked if I just going into one flow. Answer your question. Sorry, I think
Yes, you did, but still, I mean, is there any way to
Maybe I can.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is Naga. So this time, like my view on the timing is basically different companies have different timings. So if you see, like maybe Amazon might have 1 hour design interview, but like Facebook might only have 45 minutes. And if you are depending on whether you are going for like which level, like in system design, like depending on your number of years of experience, I would say the higher the experience you are, the more faster you should be, and the more things you need to cover, unless the interviewer is directing you to focus on one specific, which is like, but mostly as per my observation, the more experienced interviewers normally expect us to think of um, more things to cover and different issues to consider, and I think we should give some time at the end, like 5 to 10 minutes, to discuss some few trade-offs. And if we have missed any, and like if interviewer wants to ask like what your drawbacks of your system and how where you can do better, like again there may be some scenario of cap or NFR, how your design is addressing some of the non-functional requirements, and what are still some of the trade-offs that you have made and why you have made each of those trade-offs. So I mean, like, since the higher experience you are, the more likely that like you need to discuss most topics or all components, at least at high level.
And it also reminds me one more thing. I was going through this Facebook debrief kind of thing. So basically, from here also they will decide which level they want to put you in. The more things you have covered, they can say, okay, this guy could be a senior or this could guy be a junior.
Yeah.
Would this also be derived out of the requirements, right? Once we lock down the requirements, and if we're able to cover all those requirements within the time, right? I mean, like,
So yeah, I mean, like that is one perspective. Requirements is just whether you are covering the functionality or not, right? But not that's not just the from interview standpoint. Addressing the requirements is one thing, and in the system design perspective, what are the things that you have covered? Whether apart from addressing the functional requirements, what are the additional things you did? Like maybe it could be like monitoring or what are the other components
Right.
in
In my
picture?
mind, right.
I kind of agree with you that, I mean, the requirement is say like the file sync. So the junior can say that just, okay, I will have this sync component, that's it. and the senior will come and split that. Okay, I'll use chunk and how my sync will work.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So should we
And
say
I
like
think a lot of
should we-
system design is also focused on the engagement factor and what kind of things you're talking about, right? And if the conversation gets really interesting, because even though the interviewer might have, let's say, 3 things to cover in mind, but if some of the concepts that he or she is trying to assess in across 3 modules, maybe if I touch upon something just within file itself, like maybe queuing or maybe hashing, and we start going deeper, I believe that depending on the interviewer, they might just take that route as well and just touch on the rest.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Time, you know,
One more.
for, you know, like depth of knowledge, or sometimes they can go for the depth of knowledge.
Is the senior depend on the number of, I mean, how long they've been working as a software developer, or depend on, you know, because for me, I never work on, you know, work on the embedded system. So, you know, this is for me, you know, even though I have, you know, many years working as software developer, but, you know, I don't have experience in this system design.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenging question. That, I mean, depends on that. I think my point of view depends on the position. So if you are applying for a senior position, and so it does not mean that, I mean, you did not work that, so there'll be some relaxation for you. I don't think so.
And one more thought I had was like, I think this was also one of the side conversation Naga was helping, like the technologies that we should use, like whether should we pick S3 or HDFS, should we spend some time on like showcasing like the awareness that we have on the industry trends? Like I initially thought like some document DB which was completely wrong, and then S3 is option and HDFS is one option that Naga mentioned. When I looked it up, both of them has different trade-offs. Should we spend time on like showcasing, oh, so these are the different kinds of technologies that are available?
Yeah, I think you need to discuss briefly, because I mean, like, at least that conveys like how you are making a decision in terms of storage, right? It comes to the part like of the trade-offs. If you choose HDFS, these are the trade-offs. If you choose S3, these are the trade-offs. So
But
That's true. And I think we kind of, so definitely in terms of storage, there are few good things to show awareness, like you said. And also, like we touched upon it in terms of data model, that is another area where you can talk about some things, you know, like, you know, whether you want relational or JSON or document DB, you know, what are the trade-offs there as well. So I believe if that is a good.
just want to add one thing. So if you see in this exercise, the main focus was on this file upload, client, sync, and metadata. So right now I was not that much interested in storage or other things. But let's say I was building a library management system where I know operations on the client and would be really simple, like all CRUD operations, create, retrieve, update, delete. That time I would be more interested like how you will organize your users, because there will be a lot of relations here. So, and that time, or could be like I want search functionality or a lot of other functionalities.
Yeah.
I would be interested not to understand how you will organize your data. Here also I would be interested, but if you see the heavy lifting here is on different components. So like client itself is has lot of like how DP split into chunk, watcher, and other things. So I was more interested to know how she will manage that thing, and if the time permit, I would come to the storage at the end. But that was not my focus. When she told like okay S3 or other thing, and okay, for now it's good enough.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I mean, if the one of the non-functional requirement is to make like a low cost storage,
Yeah.
And then if you say like I would want to pick HDFS, then that would be high
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, I mean, until unless interviewer really wants to know what are the trade-off, then there's no point to actually spend on time. But yeah, there's no harm to if you have knowledge and you want to sell
Yeah.
that knowledge. There's no harm at all.
Yeah,
But yes, as what Aseem mentioned, that depends on the system because for this particular system, even the database picking the database was not the main point here. That the main point was that how you will actually sync your file with multiple clients and how you keep that metadata. But yes, if your application has a loss of relation, then interviewer may wants to know about that, how you keep your data, what database you wants to pick here, and what are the trade.
Transactions and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to mention.
yeah. That's
Then you have to tell the trade, okay, why you want to go with NoSQL, not the RDBMS. And if you want to go with NoSQL, why document, not Cassandra or key value.
Makes sense. Yep.
When we upload like 20 a file with 20 gig here, right? And then when would be a good point that the server will tell the client that the file have been successfully uploaded to the server? Because we break it to multiple chunks, right? And some chunk will be had to retransmit it.
Right. So once each of the chunks, if I'm storing on a chunk-based model, then one idea can be once I can get a confirmation about each of the chunks, right? Acknowledgement, like maybe my queuing service or my file upload service get some acknowledgement saying that all the chunks of this file have been persisted to the storage. Then I know that there is no loss there, right? Even if some component fails.
And it could be even your sync or metadata service, because once it got uploaded, it will update your metadata sync. All your clients are connected to your sync. They will automatically know like this file is done.
So the chunkers, all the chunks, whatever the IDs or whatever the ordering is, that also will be stored in the metadata, right?
Correct. I have to.
That's how other client will get to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you remember, I mentioned that, but then I told Dippy that, okay, that is not right now. I want to go in that direction. Like again, revisiting your metadata database, because that will again take some time. I was interested to go into the sync part. So I avoided going to metadata, and I knew because when she spoke about relations, I able to get the idea that if she wants to change, she would be good enough to make a change. So as an interview, sometimes we see like, okay, this person looks good in databases when she spoke about relation, and I don't want to go that route again. So now I think I have something on mind, like we can even continue discussions, or I can show you one document. I think DP and I was discussing about this grouping, the system design, and I think most of the things looks to me from there itself. So we can either spend time on the questions, or I can go and show you that grouping the system design, and then we can even see like what the recommendations from the author.
Yeah, we can, but before that, I have a question that that is for audience. So I mean, whoever actually recently gave the system design interview or in past, so could you please share your experience and tell us that how far, whether we are aligned with that or it's a bit away from real interview, or what we can we should include here. If you guys can please chime, that would be really helpful for everyone.
Yeah, that would be good feedback. Yeah.
For me specifically, it's been a while I have attended any system design interview. But it again was like the interviewer was like, when I did that, I was not very organized. Like I did not clearly mention back then when I did it, I did not clearly mention like I'm dividing the requirements into like the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. I went a little bit random, and the interviewer drove me to that direction actually, saying like, okay, let's not mix up all these things. Let's divide those things and then attack each one of those things. So at the end of it, the approach was like I was able to come to some conclusion, but because of that overall confusion that I had, like deriving the requirements, like which is the actual requirement and which is the non-functional requirement, and where I want to focus on,
Yeah.
uh, which interviewer helped me derive to, because of which I did not finish the thing in the given time. But if I was organized by myself in that, I could have done that. And I see that Dippy actually followed that approach here. Like she started with the functional requirements and then she went to non-functional requirements. Um, and then we tried to cover a lot of those things. And I believe Aseem uh, tried to also drive her into the direction that he wanted. So that was my takeaway from what I have attended. Like being
Yeah.
organized with my plans, and like make sure like your interviewer is in agreement with that, and then start with the actual design. I think this kind of followed it pretty well.
Yeah, this is over the time. Like for me also, I don't have real world system design experience. But as I'm reading about it and stuff, so yeah, over time I have kind of learned to follow this more systemized, systematic approach. But you're right. I mean, it kind of helps to even.
Yeah, I don't know if there is some like standard way everybody follows that will definitely work, but I feel like having those divided properly, I mean, like
Yeah,
ideally it would have been only requirements if it was like the old model, like a monolithic designs.
yeah,
But now that we are in the distributed world, this non-functional requirements play a major role, right? And
yeah.
also the cloud and all, like different kinds of planning.
Yeah, and there is one thing to add to that. What I have found useful is there are certain things that personally I can keep in mind for as a template, like microservice design or, this functional and non-functional split, thinking around that. So there are some aspects of the system design that are very much like I can stick to them, but there are also parts to it which I tend to keep it a little fluid because that's just like how I think about. It's hard for me to really put things in a certain format. So, um, yeah, but I follow a little mixed approach. I tend to follow templates on certain stuff, but other stuff I let it kind of flow. So I don't know how other people, like what your experience is, but um, yeah.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah,
learning.
no, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So one more question that so is it negative to actually have the requirement and not talk about that at all? So like here in this session, we had the non-functional requirement,
Yeah,
and especially about the bandwidth and all, and we did not talk about at all.
yeah,
No, but we didn't get time to that.
Yeah.
So let's say in 45 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
we can't go everything. Something DP started with herself, and some things which I wanted to explore. And I think I give her 2-3 minutes if she wants to cover anything, but that's fine. I don't think so. Like whatever we jotted down at the top,
yeah.
and cover
It has
everything.
to be covered in entirety. Yeah,
Want to
Okay.
cover everything, it can also screw up the interview because you want to do something different and interviewer want to do
yeah,
something different, and then they could not come to agreement.
So I think that if we go a little deeper on the back to envelope calculation, then we may not need to cover the read, versus write, and also the network network bandwidth, right? Because if we have that number, then we will say, okay, how many read, how many write, and then how many network bandwidth can support it. And also, I think I don't know. I want to ask, would it better if we tried it initially? We tried in terms of, break it to multi-tier. So would it, the flow would be easier to follow? Like, the client tier, the middle tier, and then the server and the database, for example.
But here it already split into different tiers. Data store is different. Your backend is different. You have different microservices. Your clients are different. So I already see like different tiers here.
But I believe
I would. We can see that, right? But I mean, like we draw the line, draw like the vertical line. Like okay, this is a client side. This is on the server side.
yeah. Good.
And how bad is that actually getting the incomplete requirements? Like here in this case, what we talked about the total number of user and the TPS, but there's no relation between that, right? Unless we have a daily active user or weekly active user, whatever we call.
The one thing on that is like when I thought of that, jotting down that requirement was, during the interview, because I don't know which route it will go, right? How deep interviewer wants me to go in a certain route. But during the interview, like I had some ideas when we talked about chunk service, how that number of users would play a role here and how I can optimize this, maybe multi-threaded and all that. But like Aseem said, it all depends on, it's a dynamic process, right? Even though I'm jotting down those points, but if I get time or if the interaction goes that way, then it's good that I have, thought about that. And in my opinion, and others can chime in, but I think if we miss something, we can always, when we get to the point, we can ask clarifying questions. We don't have to just freeze everything in the beginning, because that puts a lot of pressure on, on interviewee, like
true.
And, I just want to mention one thing. I think I answered a little bit wrong. Sorry for that. When Praveen asked a question that if we have not visited some kind of a non-functional requirement, was it good or bad? I have answered that if you couldn't cover something, that's fine. But that also reminds me one thing. For example, Praveen told like we spoke about some non-functional requirements. I never visited that. So basically, while designing this, that should come implicitly or like. So basically, let's take example when we are designing this metadata database. So that time, if I would be the person who is presenting, I would say, oh, my non-functional requirement says I could have 1 million users. So a relational database could not support that. So I should take something like a NoSQL data store. So basically, I'm using my data points from the non-functional and also telling my trade-offs between SQL and NoSQL. And then I'm telling finally I would go with the NoSQL because my data points tell about my usage and other things. And so if you see in this way, I've also spoke about trade-off between SQL and NoSQL, and also I also touched about my non-functional requirement, like I have 1 million users. So if you see, it becomes a full-fledged package itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, when you take some design, database design, you can even go back to your non-functional estimates, and then you can say, and basically when Dippy was telling, I will break down into 3 components of file upload, sync, battery. She could also do like, we have 1 million users, everybody hitting this monolithic service, it will crash it. So basically have separation of concern, different users will hit different services based on their need.
But when you say 1 million user, Aseem, did you not, you said like we wanted to design this for a UW application, so there won't be 1 million users, right?
Because I was
No.
telling Kitty, like she could have clarified me who is my customer. So customer part is missing. And then I could say like my customer is entire Washington state. Or I could have said like all California state users. Yes, that time the number of customers could change.
Okay. Makes sense.
But we never spoke about customers. That's what I was trying to say. Like in the interview, customer obsession should be seen. Like it should come inevitable. Like we are customer obsessed.
Yeah. I think I agree on that. Like our anchor point should be like, who are we building this for, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't capture that part, I mean, like we haven't captured all the requirements. So if you haven't captured all the requirements, I would say, I mean, if you haven't really captured and agreed on the requirements from the interviewer, I would say that's a failure on the interview part. Like the first part of the interview, you failed by not capturing the requirements, and that could go against you at a later stage of interview. That's my personal feeling. Like you didn't capture it. Probably interviewer had an idea like, I want to build this only for 100 users. I want to build it only for 10 professors in the university. So you could have finished that system design within half an hour, but like by not capturing it, you fail yourself in both the ways, I think, if you haven't captured the requirement properly. That could be even like the daily active users, the rate at which we want to support. I think all these things, at least we should even ask.
Yeah. And that was a good learning for me because
I
I
think
was honed into my thought process about this is Dropbox, this is Google.
Yeah, that's really, what Aseem just mentioned, that the last point. So few non-functional requirements are obvious and should consider even without talking separately, like the number of user, TPS. So based on that, your design can change.
Yeah.
That was a good point. Yeah.
Also, I think that we need to write some API too, right? That is like the contract. What it look like when upload the file and receive the confirmation.
Yeah.
Yes. If that, so, like I mentioned, if that would be like library management system, I would have, or it's just a web-based system, I would have asked Dippy to tell me the contracts. But right now, here again, my focus was like some other things. So I didn't go that much like what kind of communication she should. Actually, that was on my mind to talk about whether she would do RESTful TCP, UDP. But I thought, okay, I want to know other things more. So I avoided that for now. Probably in an interview, I could have even asked like, when what kind of protocol you will use? Would you use TCP, UDP, other things?
Yeah.
So just want to check before we what you want to do next week. I think Naga mentioned that he wants to do something.
Aseem, your voice is breaking or it's very low.
Like, what do you want to do next week now? Want to do something similar or want to do knowledge sharing sessions?
Sorry, Aseem, are you asking me? I was little away. So yeah, next week, I think maybe if you want to alternate, I can do some knowledge session.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we can come back on this again.
Okay.
Is that okay, or like?
Actually, I would
anything is fine. It's up to volunteers. So they have to choose.
Yeah, like whatever.
Yeah, I think I can do some knowledge session. Either like I'm thinking one of the topics on mind is transactions. Other one is like probabilistic algorithms. I don't know, like if anyone has specific.
Yeah, other people, anybody can chime in about your ideas or.
I think
someone mentioned about the template, right? And I think it would be helpful. First we can go with the template and see, how, the template first. Then we do the system design, and kind of follow the template.
What do you mean by template? template to how to approach the system design
Yeah,
questions?
yeah. Like in the, I think
I
there
think
was a
Yeah, it's similar to
cram.
educative, whatever it's there, right? Like
Yeah,
they have.
I shared one long time ago in the system design channel. So I'll try to find whether if I'll find, I'll share it again.
yeah. But then, you know, we get a template, we follow that template, and, you know, would be, I think it'd
We
be
can do
better, right?
that, but I think the other
Hey,
question.
Aseem, do you want to stop the recording? I see it's still going on. I don't know if you
Yeah,
still want to
you can
capture
stop
all this.
recording.